Hello and welcome to the Technical Footballer Podcast, dedicated to creating better players with advice from professionals all across the country. Today we're joined by Solihull Moors defender Nathan Cameron as he talks about dealing with different strikers and how his approach changes with every game. So without further ado, here's Nathan.
Then signed permanently for Bury for 5 years. Enjoyed a lot of highs and lows there. Got promoted from League Two. Got relegated from League One. Left there when I was about 26, I think. And then went to Macclesfield for just under 2 years. Survived relegation. And then was at Wigan earlier this season. And now I've just signed for Solihull about a month ago.
Okay, lovely. It's like us guys were speaking about before. It's never a simple question, is it? Like, oh, I went from here, I went from there. It's always like this. But that is
rough road, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's what success and failures look like. So yeah, definitely. But yeah, so I guess on the topic, obviously, defending against one or two strikers. The first question was, does playing against one or two strikers affect where you like to hold the defensive line? So i.e., if you were up against two strikers, does that mean like you decide to drop a little bit deeper? Or maybe because you've got just a one striker, does that mean you and your centre-back partner prefer to step up a little bit? What's your kind of positioning on that, Nathan?
Yeah, I guess it all depends on formations as well, whether you're playing a three at the back or a four. I know a lot of teams like to play three lately, especially in modern day football. But I don't really think the principle changes too much. I mean, me personally, I prefer to play, if I'm playing against one striker, play higher up the pitch, try and squeeze his space, almost play one centre-back almost in and around his feet, maybe in front of him at times, and then one just behind, closing space. And then against two, maybe drop a little bit deeper, not too deep, but a little bit deeper just to protect the spacing behind, because you always know there's going to be a runner off your back shoulder. So yeah, I think playing against one striker is, ideally for me, playing higher up the pitch will be a better option, just to try and close the space.
So true. But I guess, obviously, I guess one of the assumptions is when you're up against two strikers is that like one of them's bound to be a little bit more quicker. What if it was the case that you were up against, I guess, I don't know, like two old-fashioned strikers, should we say, just a little bit more on the slower side? Would that encourage you and your centre-back partner to get up a little bit more? Or would it still remain the same with just two strikers dropping a bit deeper?
Yeah, if I'm up against two older or bigger strikers that I know not really going to challenge me in behind for pace, it's definitely better to squeeze up the pitch and squeeze their space, because you know it's only going to come into their feet or into their chest, around head height for them to flick on or hold up. So I think the best thing to do is to squeeze the space and to make sure that everything comes off them, or anything that gets flicked on, you know, you're in a good line, and you're not giving them too much space to play into, almost.
Yeah, totally. Definitely.
Question: how much initiative can you take during the game? So obviously your defensive line, etc., is going to be talked about beforehand. The gaffer ultimately makes that decision, right? But if you're noticing something during that game that one of the strikers doing that maybe you've not had a shout for on the sideline, are you going to say close down that striker a bit quicker, maybe drop that a little bit deeper without that shout?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it all comes from the manager. If the manager's telling you to do something, you got to do it. But I think you can get a feel for the game when you're in it. You can get a feel for the tempo, for the momentum that maybe the other team has. As a team, you might have to drop a bit deeper because, you know, they're getting a lot of the ball and, you know, they're getting a lot of joy, and you might have to weather the storm almost for like 10, 15 minutes. But yeah, sometimes on the pitch, you got to take control. As much as the gaffer might be like, all right, do this, do that, you know, as a defender or whatever position that you're in, you know how to kind of manage the game at times, and how the game's going, almost.
So if like there's a particularly fast striker and he's done you a couple of times on that run in behind, and your gaffer's just like, no, stay high. You're just like, oh, I kind of want to drop back a little bit here.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that can't happen. I mean, I've been in that position many a times. You know what I mean? When I've got
Really?
good strikers that might be causing me trouble in behind, you have to give yourself that depth. You have to give yourself that space. Even if you're the quickest defender, I know even in the Premier League, there's defenders that believe they're quite quick and try and gamble with the line. But I always believe the ball always travels faster than any player on the pitch. Do you know what I mean? So no matter what you think you're doing, no matter how quick you think you are, being in the right position will always be the best thing for you, no matter if you rely on your pace or you don't. If you're in the right position, you're always going to be ahead of the game almost. I mean, there's defenders over the course of history that have not had the best pace, John Terry, Cannavaro, but they're always in the right position. They never seem to get caught out of position. They never seem to get caught for pace. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
I find it quite interesting watching Premier League football these days with the new offside rules that they have to continue playing on until I think it's like the attacking team have had this shot. The line doesn't put his flag up. I feel a bit sorry for the defenders now because back in the day you'd get the very old-fashioned slow ones that would deliberately play that offside trap, and the whistle would blow. They wouldn't have to go any further, but now they have to continue to keep running back until that phase of play. So how would you feel about that, Nate? How would you adapt? Obviously you have to adapt to it, don't you? It's a new rule, but what would you be quite frustrated as a centre back having to continue that play? Oh,
very. I mean, to me the rules are just a bit stupid, really. If you're offside, you're offside. Do you know what I mean? If you put up your flag, you should be, the play should be over almost. To run back and have to do, a 50-yard sprint for them to be told that, it's offside, it's done. It's extra work. You know what I mean? That's the defender anyway. You don't want to be doing those kind of so to be doing that is frustrating, but that's the game. That's the way the game's going. Unfortunately, you have to play to the rules, and that's what they are now.
Yeah, agreed.
I think, little story, guys. So obviously me and Nathan know each other through playing at Coventry City's youth team together. So we were fortunate enough to play quite a few games together, centre back. Again, going off youth team football, Nathan, I'm sure you'd agree with me. A lot of the football was played to the feet, almost like teams were trying to score the perfect goal sometimes. And I think, for my personal preference, I enjoyed it when the play was sort of in front of me. And whenever a ball went into a centre forward, I found it quite. I preferred if a striker tried to pin me, because I would use their contact and I'd try and nip in front of them and try and get the ball back. One game comes into mind. It was Leicester City we played away from home, and they were a pretty old-fashioned outfit. So I remember from the first whistle, I think every time they got the ball, they tried to turn us in behind. And it was a shock to my system because playing all the other teams, everything was in front. I remember that game. I think I come off with a pulled groin. I remember having to fly out to Germany actually 2 weeks later to get a hernia operation. I think they finished. Mate, they finished me off. Mate,
who was up front in that game?
Oh, it was
Was it Adi Youssef?
Adi Youssef.
Yeah.
You know what he's like? He's relentless, constant, always on you. But Nate, how do you feel about what do you prefer? Do you prefer the ball being played into feet, or do you like having to deal with the one in behind? And what sort of tips would you give to someone having to deal with those two different situations?
I prefer everything in front. I think most defenders do. Anything in front of you, you can deal with. Your job's to, keep the striker going backwards or keep the play going back almost. I think the balls in behind every defender's nightmare, really. No one really wants to be running in behind, facing your own goal, having someone chasing you down all the time. I think that's when the most mistakes are made as central defenders. When you're put under pressure, when you've got to make a decision, when you're not too sure whether to pass back, you don't really want to kick it out of play. You're trying to do something cute on a ball or something. That's when you got to get caught. So I think personally, everything in front is fine. Do you know what I mean? No one's got a problem with that, as long as the play's going backwards or you can see everything. As long as everything in front of you can see. I think as a defender, you should be happy with that. It's when you're getting turned, when the ball's getting put in behind you all the time. That's when strikers are going to get in. That's when all it takes is you to switch off one time and a striker can get in from one ball, and that could kill you really.
Yeah. And as a centre back, whilst the game's sort of happening and you're seeing these things happen, so you may have set up with a high line and then you've assessed the game and they're starting to play those balls in behind you. What do you do as a centre back? How are you speaking with the rest of your defenders in that situation? Do you drop your line, or do you sort of continue to keep that high line? What would you do?
Again, it depends. It depends who you're playing against. I know, especially in the league that I'm playing in now, a lot of teams like to put that ball in behind. That's, the main aim of the game is to put it down the channels and, create that space to play into. But I think as long as you communicate and as long as you and your centre back and the rest of the back four or the back three are on the right wavelength, you can either keep high line and someone can drop in and almost protect that space in behind, whilst the others are, dealing with whatever's in front. Or you can go the other way and, drop a bit deeper. Again, depends on the momentum of the game, how it's going for your team. You might have to drop a bit deeper, close that space for them, and then, play from there almost.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think it's so true. 9 times out of 10, all defenders just love it when they can see everything in front of them and play to feet, because it's almost their game. Like, you can get close to someone, you can get physical with someone, and the game is just that much more slower. Obviously, when things are going fast and they're going in behind, like, it's just so unpredictable for defenders. I think what it was Sol Campbell that said to Robin van Persie once, like, look, because obviously Van Persie was such a tall striker, like he obviously always used to love playing things to feet and being a second striker like that. He said, look, Robin, you have to make runs in behind. Like, if you don't, it just makes my life easy. But yeah, just moving on to my next question, Nathan. What would be your preference in this situation? Obviously, the times have changed from youth development to where you are now. But would you prefer to deal with 2 strikers or deal with 1 striker and 1 midfield runner? Because obviously, having that 1 striker invites an extra midfielder and can create that extra headache for you. What would be your preference be, and why?
For me, I think I'd rather deal with the 2 strikers. I think I'm probably used to that from, coming in at the age of 19, 10 years ago. That's how the game was almost religiously played, with 2 strikers up against you. I think the one-on-one does cause a little bit more problems, especially if teams play well, if they, used to playing that way, and the number 10 is quite clever. It's difficult sometimes because, the number 10 plays in between the lines, and you have to talk to the midfielder in front of you. You have to, make sure he's screening, make sure he's not allowing that ball to feet. But at the same time, there's going to be times where you have to go as a centre back. You have to come out your slot and close that space. For me personally, I try and wait on the pass. So whoever's got the ball, if they're seeing that ball into feet, into that number 10, I'm trying to wait until he's just about to play that pass. And if I can get there, I'm going to go. If I can't, sometimes you have to stay off. Sometimes you almost have to let him turn and see if you can find those passes. But that's when, the problems arise almost, you know what I mean? That's what the number 10's there to do, to get in between the lines, to turn and to slip balls in between the defence and to cause problems. So for me, that's when it's a bit harder to deal with, because there's 2 strikers. You know what you're going to get. You know it's going to be either in behind you or into feet. And again, it's almost 1 against 1. But, when that one number 10's in the hole, it's difficult because you can't really, sometimes it's hard to decide whether to go, whether to stay, whether to talk to your midfielder to sit a bit deep or just to get him to screen. Sometimes the game's too quick. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it happens way too fast and you can't go, you can't talk in time. And that's when they're going to get on the ball and that's when they're going to turn and cause problems.
Yeah, so true. So true. Yeah, just sometimes like you can't even get your words out because the game is going so quick. Like it can be a nightmare, stuff like that. But obviously, you mentioned with the midfield runner, it's also important for your midfielder to also track that run and see that. Is there a certain player that you've played with that's actually always been quite good at that, or that's actually helped you out with that number 10? Is there like a defensive midfielder or just a midfielder during your time growing up where you thought, actually, he's actually done his job very well, and because of that, that's allowed me to deal with the striker a lot better because I haven't had to deal with that number 10?
Yeah, one that springs to mind, probably the best defensive midfielder I play with is Calvin Ituhu. When I was at Bury, I played with him for a good 2-3 years, and he was excellent at just protecting that space into the feet. I could talk to him, tell him left shoulder, right shoulder, screen left calf, screen right, and it would be like clockwork. The connection between us. He just understood exactly how to play that role, exactly how to not just defend, but defend from in front as a defensive midfielder. I know a team play with the defensive midfielder almost marking the number 10, but I think if you can get that defensive midfielder to just screen almost, it kind of kills that space anyway. That ball's not going to be played into that number 10 if that defensive midfielder's always in his line, in his eye line, and always protecting his feet. He's never going to get the ball. Do you know what I mean? So Calvin was brilliant at that, and it was just very easy to play with someone like that because I didn't really have to go in. I could push up the line, and I knew the only ball that we could play is either in behind or maybe a drop ball into feet. But that's bread and butter for me. I'm going to attack the ball every time. So that's probably the person that I would say.
Yeah.
So Nathan, same sort of question. Other than Curtis, who's the best centre back partnership you've had?
I love that. There's been a few, to be fair. At Bury, Pablo Mills, Jimmy McNulty was brilliant for me. Coming through there, but probably the best I would say would be Ben Turner. That was my first season as a professional at Coventry. He was just a beast. He was 6'4", built like an ox, but he could run with the fastest strikers in the league at the time, and he was just brilliant for me coming through because he helped me so much as a partnership. He was just easy. He was so strong, so dominant in air, and could play a bit as well. Do you know what I mean? So he was brilliant in terms of helping me develop, watching his game, trying to take aspects of him and put it into my game. And I just thought we worked well as a partnership. That first season we didn't concede too many goals in the first half of the season under Adi Boothroyd, and I just felt like he helped me a lot into what I am now as a defender. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to be like him.
Good days.
Nathan, you talk about obviously Ben helping you through that early part of your career. Who did you look up to as a centre back? So watching football as a young lad, who did you try and base your game off?
As a young lad, I think because I was always quite big, quite strong, a lot of people just said, Sol Campbell. But no disrespect to Sol, I worked under Sol at Macclesfield. I thought he was an unbelievable defender, terrific. Maybe should have been captain of England at one time, but he was never the person that I looked up to in terms of that's exactly what I want to be. I think the person that I would say would 100% be Rio Ferdinand. That's who I always wanted to be. That's who I always looked up to. I'm a Manchester United fan. That's who was the pinnacle for me. When I was growing up, he was the best defender in the world to me. He was, great on the ball, always in the right position, quick enough, did everything right. Just looked like the Rolls Royce of defenders almost. Almost what Van Dijk is now. That's what Rio was back in the day, and that's exactly who I wanted to be like. If anyone asked me, that would be the answer to the question, really.
Important do you think it is to have these guys that you look up to, and then also when you are going through, you had Ben saying mentor you through? How important do you think that is to find that sort of guy that's going to mentor you? Massively,
because as a central defender, I think there's always different types. You might be a bit bigger, a bit smaller, a bit quicker, a bit slower. There's always got to be someone that you can find a even balance with and think, okay, he's more of the defender that I want to be, the defender that I am. I need to kind of mold my game off him and see how he's been able to get through his career being that kind of defender, if you know what I mean. So I think as a young player, you kind of need to find that defender that you is either in your first team or that you look up to somewhere in the world. I know a lot of players and a lot of defenders like Virgil van Dijk, but it doesn't have to be the best defender in the world. It could just be a defender that suits your game or the game that you want to be. You know what I mean? The defender that you want to be. So I think it's massively important to find a mentor, or to find that one player that you can kind of grasp and take little bits of their game and put it into yours.
Definitely.
We have the debate, obviously, with how good Virgil van Dijk is. Obviously, not questioning his ability is unbelievable. But you compare someone like him and Rio Ferdinand and the kind of striker they would have played against in Rio's era. Now, Rio had the Drogbas and the Henrys, even players like Alan Shearer to deal with on a week-to-week basis. Do you think Van Dijk is put under as much pressure from the sort of the crop of centre forwards that are out there in the Premier League now? Do you think he could handle what was around in Rio's day?
It's difficult to say. I mean, obviously, it's two different eras of football almost. Obviously, Van Dijk's playing right now. Obviously, he's injured, but he's in this era. Me personally, I don't think he would be as comfortable as he is now. That's not to disrespect the strikers that are in the Premier League or around the world right now. I just think the talent and the ability and the creativity of strikers back in the day, or 10, 15 years ago, is maybe on a slightly different level. Just because I believe there was more world-class players back then. Now, you only really class Messi, Ronaldo, maybe Neymar as the top three, and there's no debating they're totally world-class. But I think for every single other player, almost, as a striker, there's not many that you can be like 100% they're world-class, they're one of the best in the world. So I think Van Dijk would definitely struggle a lot more, playing against the Drogbas, the Henrys, the Shearers. People probably fail to realise just how good those players were and just how talented they were back in the day, and how many goals and how many problems they caused for players like Rio, from Sol, for all defenders across the world. So me personally, I think it's really... Say again, Kurt, sorry.
It is the physicality. It's that relentless physicality throughout the whole game. They would just get up against you and be forcing you into constant mistakes, making you second guess yourself, having to win headers for the whole game. It was that relentlessness, wasn't it? Why they, found it so difficult.
100%. And I think even just the amount of goals that they scored every single type of goals. The Drogbas, the Shearers, the Henrys, they almost carried an aura around them. So, you knew when you were stepping on the field against one of them that it was going to be a tough day. I think even in today's football, a lot of football is dependent upon confidence and upon exactly how you see yourself on a football pitch. I believe if you believe that you're the best player on the pitch, you're always going to go out and give your best. You might not have the best performance, but you always got that confidence. I know, and I see a lot of players that suffer from, lack of confidence, and, they struggle sometimes when they get on the pitch. They can't produce performance after performance because, they might be going up against someone that they think, it's going to be a tough test today, and start questioning themselves. So I just feel like on that pitch, you need to have that kind of confidence to be like, I'm one of the best players on this pitch. I need to give everything that I've got. And again, it's not to say that you're going to be the best player on the pitch. You're not going to be 10 out of 10 every week, but when you're going up against tough strikers, that they're not going to have an easy day. They're going to find it hard to score goals, and that's your job to stop them scoring goals.
Definitely. Like I always say as a coach as well myself, like one of the biggest things that I say to players that they can bring is just the confidence in your ability. Like that's the biggest thing that you can bring before you get in the car, before you take that walk down to the pitch. That's the main thing that you need to have. You need to have that confidence in your ability. But yeah, Nathan, I loved how you touched upon as well how players don't have to look up to Virgil van Dijk or Rio Ferdinand. It can be just having one little skill that you admire about a player, and just sticking to it. So, that might be like Ron Vlaar and how good he was at blocking, or I don't know, it might be like John Stones playing out from the back or something like that. Which brings me to my next question. How does it differ for yourself when you're up against one or two strikers when you're playing out from the back? Is it a lot more to think about when you're up against two? Obviously, I can imagine the pressing is a bit more intense because that 2v2 there, or do you actually prefer it with two because there might be one less in midfield or something like that?
It depends. Again, like I said, in this day and age, a lot of teams play three at the back. So, it depends whether you're playing a 3 or a 4. But I'd prefer to play against, one striker playing out from the back. I mean, it's a lot easier to get out. It's a lot easier to split, and there's always going to be at least one or maybe two open players, that the keeper can play to and be confident that they can turn out and find another player. Playing against two can almost mark the 4 if it's a back 4, or even a back 3. Just play the spaces and kind of mark in between. So it makes it a bit more difficult to play out and then find that next pass. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot of teams that play that 3 at the back struggle in terms of playing out, because they end up playing into one of the defenders. They get closed down, they play back to the keeper just booms it. Do you know what I mean? But I think against the 1, it's a lot easier to get out, whether it's a 3 or a 4, to turn out to find that midfield player, or the wing back or the full back, because you don't get that same kind of press. And again, it depends what team you're in. It depends, who can get that ball, turn, and play those balls into midfield, because it takes a good player, it takes a player that's confident on ball to open out his body, to accept the pressure that's coming from the striker and still try and find those passes.
Definitely.
As a right-footed centre-half, Nathan, do you have a preference on playing on the right-hand side or the left-hand side when you're bringing the ball out from the back? I'm thinking from when I was playing, I enjoyed playing on the left-hand side as a right-footer. I just feel like I was able to come into the midfield, and it opened up the game a little bit more for me. So I could play those little disguise balls around the corner, little outside foot passes, sort of like down the line and stuff like that. Do you have a preference?
Not really. I used to, almost always want to play on the right-hand side. But as I was coming up for the youth team, I played a lot on the left. As you know, Kurt, obviously, I think mainly through the scholarship days, that's when I started to play on the left, and I started to enjoy it a lot more. Again, like you said, I was able to turn out a lot more, find, diagonal passes or, passes into midfield. I felt like I saw a lot more of the game, and a lot more of the pitch opener. But then, as I started my career, I started to play on the right-hand side more, and I enjoyed that as well. So I wouldn't say I had a personal preference as to which side I play on. Again, it depends what formation you're playing, 3 or a 4. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't really mind what side I play on. But you have to, I think it's good to learn both sides as a centre-back, especially coming through. It's good to learn playing both positions. Don't try and just stick to one and just say, I'm only a right-sided centre-back, or I'm only a left-sided centre-back. You have to be able to know both positions, because they are quite different, and a lot of people just think, well, he's just a centre-back. But I know players, trust me, that cannot play on that left-hand side or struggle because they either don't like using their left foot, or they don't see the same kind of pictures that they do on the right-hand side. But I just believe that if you get used to playing both, even in training or, doing certain things just to see different sides of the pitch, then you can almost know both positions. So, you might get thrown into either one at any time. You have to know how to deal with it.
Definitely. And then next question was, Nathan, is that obviously we've spoken a lot about how the game has changed, between two and one strikers, etc. But also, not only that, the role of the striker has changed, as we've seen with deeper line forwards and false nines being integrated. In terms of dealing with like a false nine or a withdrawn striker, what's your usual go-to there? Are you more prone to dropping in and giving them a bit more pressure, or would you rather back off and just give them the time and space and just kind of worry about things coming in behind?
Again, it depends on the communication between you and your midfield. I think if they like to drop a lot deeper, it depends who's running behind you. It depends what you're saying to the midfield. You know, if they want to press high, or if your team wants to press high, I think you just need to make sure the communication's right in between the whole back four and the midfield. Because if you squeeze that space, then they've not got a lot of space to work in anyway. I find it difficult, like I said earlier, playing with that one-on-one, or that false nine that likes to drop deeper, because you're always unsure whether to go. And then you don't want to go too late and be caught out of position, because that's all they're looking for that centre back to make that wrong decision, and they can slip a ball in beside you, and that other striker's in, or the other midfield player's in. So you've always got to be communicating to your midfield, communicating to your other centre backs, to make sure that you go at the right time, or you stay and you protect that space in behind.
Sure. And when you do go out, how important is it for you to communicate, to like say, oh, I'm going out, and what's everyone else doing behind you? Like, are they staying the same? Are they kind of narrowing in a little bit? Like, what's your usual protocol when you would go and press someone in midfield? Like, that might be that 10, it might be that false 9. Like, do you communicate, or like you need to narrow, or are you just going straight in and just trying to win that ball?
I think if you are going in, we do a lot of work, especially at Solihull now, on exactly whoever presses, whether it's the centre back, the right side centre back, the left side centre back, you have to narrow up right behind. It has to be like clockwork. If I go in and press, everyone behind me has to narrow and has to shut that space off. Because the worst thing is that ball, played into that position that I was just in, or down the side. Everything has to be forced wide. If you narrow, then nothing can really get played in between you. Nothing can get penetrated. You know what I mean? As a defensive line, you don't want to get penetrated through the middle. Everything has to be on the outside. So it gives the whole team a chance to recover, because it makes them have to make another pass or another 2-3 passes, which should eventually allow everyone to filter back into position in time. And again, if you're going in, your main focus is to force that player back. You can't let him turn. If you're going in, you have to either go in and force him back, or if he does get a turn, for me personally, I'm bringing him down, or I'm making sure a bit of contact on him, so he can't get a free pass away, or it's not easy for him to run at me or get past me, because again, if he gets turned and he starts running at the back line, that's when he's going to start causing problems.
No.
Nathan, very quickly, your body position when you go to close down, how would you, anyone watching at home, a young player, what kind of body position would you be expected to go in when you are closing down? Would you run up straight? Are you getting low? Are you on the side angle? How would you close down that midfielder?
Good question.
I think it's best to get low, get close, get touch tight, not too tight, but I would say about an arm's length distance. So you can't just roll you, can't just take a touch and go past you. I've been in many games when I've got that number 10 that's in the hole. And I know a lot of players struggle to play it well, but I can tell you about one game at Bury. We played Coventry away. And that's when James Maddison was playing the hole, number 10. And to tell you for free, he caused us an absolute problem. Like the amount of times that I tried to go in deep with him, and his first touch to take it away from me, it's almost like he felt me coming, and he would take that touch and he would be gone. So you have to be careful about going in too fast, in too tight, so you don't get rolled. And just make sure you're low, arm's length away, maybe on that side angle. I know a lot of people, have different techniques or like different ways of doing it. But if you get into the right position, which a lot of coaches teach to get low and arm's length, I think that's the best way to deal with it, and make sure you're always forcing them back, and always got the ability to turn. When they move the ball, you turn. When they move the ball the other way, you turn, just so you're always on the right side of the ball.